the man who is responsible, he was the chairman of our committee for the affair. He's up there on the stairway, Frank McGrath. On the back of your program tonight, you see a list of names of captains over the last 25 years. I would like the different captains of Ray's teams, starting with Dick Tripto, to please stand up at your individual tables around the room. The captains of Ray's ball clubs over the 25 years. Tony Kelly was first, I believe, yes. Ray's first team. Stand up, please. The different captains. All right, all the other captains stand up around, because I know we have, of all of the captains, here they are, they're standing up now. Eddie Mikan and Gordy. Of all of Ray's captains, tonight I think outside of MC Thompson, who was in service, and Jimmy Lampkin, who has died, I think all of Ray's captains but two were able to make it tonight. Up at the speaker's table, I would like to introduce now the people who will not be speaking to us. On my far left, Mike Hollett, Auditor of the State of Illinois. Mike Hollett. Father Wangler, Vice President of DePaul and Chairman of our Athletic Board. Father Wangler. Next to me, Mrs. Ray Meyer, Marge Meyer. The very Reverend Comerford J. O'Malley, longtime President of DePaul, now Chancellor of DePaul, Father O'Malley. Mrs. Pat Mikan, former DePaul graduate. On my far right, Dick Klein, General Manager, owner of the Chicago Bulls. The table behind me, on the left, former All-American basketball player from the University of Detroit, St. George High School athlete, longtime coach and athletic director at the University of Detroit, Bob Callahan. Next to Bob, as far as DePaul is concerned, we felt that he was the coach of the year, not Johnny Wooden, and that was the man who brought Dayton up to the runner-up spot in the NCAA tournament, Don Donaher, basketball coach at Dayton. Next, Stan Lowe, athletic director of Marquette University. And a DePaul student, Bill Cunningham, head of the Council of Arts and Science Education. Last summer, as we planned this testimonial, Frank and Jim came up with one name that we wanted to be our Toastmaster, and that was the name of Jack Brickhouse. We made up our mind that we wanted the best, and price would be no object. We were going to go all the way. Frank called Jack Brickhouse up one day and explained to him that we wanted him to head Ray's affair, and Frank asked Jack his price, and Jack said, "For Ray, the price is nothing. I'm happy to do it, my long-standing friendship with Ray," and he said, "I would be proud to be your Toastmaster at no fee." And that's one reason why Mr. Jack Brickhouse, whether you watch him on TV and Channel 9 or listen to him on the radio, whether it's the Sox or the Cubs or the Bears or the Bulls, you may not always agree with them, but at least you'll watch him and you'll listen to him, and that's why Jack and WGN, as far as we're concerned, they're number one in Illinois and number one in Chicago as far as sports. Mr. Jack Brickhouse.
Now you have a pretty good idea of what I'm worth. I'm the only guy who's a member of the American Federation of Radio and Television Artists whom they paid not to picket this week. We have the usual assortment of telegrams and well-wishing wires. In a way, this is a kind of a mistake. You should never give an announcer a captive audience like this, but we'll try to keep in mind that there is an old saying in our business that one of the things you shouldn't do is sell it and then stand up here and fall in love with the sound of your own soap opera voice and buy it back again before you're through. Also, I will not quote any of the remarks that I heard today after the ball game and discussing today's activities at Wrigley Field with Leo DeRocher, because I admit that this is a pretty liberal world we're living in, but Leo did drop in, wish Ray well. He has a little thing going tonight. He's near the phone, he and John Holland, because he actually says that there's a chance that they might be making a deal. However, I do want to say this, that I have never thought I'd ever get to the place where the ecumenical movement would be so advanced and so radically different from anything I grew up with that we would parlay DePaul and Minsky's. There is positively no truth to the rumor, started by a vicious man from Notre Dame, that Father O'Malley will lead the parade down the runway when this is all over. I am very, very impressed, of course, with the remarkably smooth organization to this setup we've got here tonight. McGrath and Ken and all of them have done a beautiful job. I'm not used to this kind of smoothly oiled machinery. After all, I live in the world of Casey Stengel, who, for example, must have really shaken those kids up the last year he managed down in Florida when he said, "All right, gentlemen, I would please like to have you now line up out here alphabetically according to size." But we are here tonight. We are here tonight to pay a well-deserved tribute to a fellow who probably his only experience with the slush fund is to say, "Marge, could you let me have $10 to buy a pair of galoshes? It's one of those winters." And of course, I think we will all agree that anybody who shot all those set shots two-handed all those years cannot be all bad. We also, of course, are here in the spirit of friendship and good fellowship. Ray Meyer, of course, is a good deal like Will Rogers in that he never met a man he didn't like. Of course, I remember Georgie Jessel saying he didn't find that any great virtue. At least two of his wives were the same way. As I said, we have the usual assortment of wires. Now, I notice that many of you fellas are here with your wives tonight, which is good. There are many of you who are obviously here not with your wives, and I am a married man myself, and I know this much about pass-outs. If you get a 6-hour pass, you can't use 3 now and bank 3. You better use them all up the same night. So I am not about to be guilty of using up any more of your pass-out time than I have to, because I understand things have been very, very tough on Rush Street anyway, and they need the business. But before we get any farther with this thing, I do want to, because I certainly don't want to forget anything like this, and I want to do it while it's on my mind. And before we get into these wires, may I please acknowledge the presence here of the Meyer family. We have Barbara and Jerry Starzek, Tom and Mary, his wife, we have Pat Meyer, Dee Dee, Joey, and Bob. They're all here. Would you please stand up? Now let's go through some of these wires. I'm not going to read these wires because, after all, this would take too much time. But I do want to acknowledge wires from people like Dan Ward, and from, here's a fellow who was a great basketball player, played with Ray in the old days. He's president of the sports lodge at the B'nai B'rith, High Fagenburg. I was with High in Las Vegas a couple of weeks ago, and I'm glad he's got enough money left to send a wire. You understand that Ray played with Fagenburg in the B'nai B'rith League, and Fagenburg played with Ray in the Knights of Columbus League. So they go back a few years together, these two. Harvey Wittenberg, who was up watching the Chicago Blackhawks along with Lloyd Pettin, going to make sure they win tomorrow night, sends a wire. and he's understandably absent. Jim Kelly sends one in. Herb Jones from Notre Dame. Your alumni dues are overdue, Ray. Joe Mullaney, the basketball coach at Providence College, will let Dick Klein and George Mikan wrestle 2 out of 3 falls to see which one gets to draft Clark from up there. Or Walker, rather. It's Walker, isn't it? Yeah. And your old coach, Ossie Goldblatt, says hello here, Ray. Where did he coach you?
The ABC.
The ABC. All right, there must be some people here who know what you're talking about. It's a little tough for me from Channel 9 to say ABC, but Bill Fitch, basketball coach at Bowling Green. And from our old friend Vincent Garrity, he's certainly eligible to send a wire to this one. His middle name is DePaul. And from good old Hank Iba at Oklahoma State. I think one of the first ball games I ever worked down there at Bradley for Robbie, who if he were alive would certainly be here tonight, was one of those like about a 20 to 18 ball game between Iba and the Bradley Braves. Bob McKinnon from Canisius College, Ray, and Dan Ronan from Congress, member of Congress. And Jim McCafferty and Jack Cherry from Xavier University send wires. Reverend Thomas Brennan from Notre Dame sends one. Branch McCracken, bless him, from down in Bloomington, Indiana. Johnny D, you've heard of Johnny D, Ray, Notre Dame. Lou Watson from Indiana University, the coach down there. Morris and Sons at 1335 South Halstead, 20% off and everything in the counter for the next 30 days. Taps Gallagher, John Gallagher, Director of Athletics at Niagara. Tony and Lois Malsack, this comes from Chicago. Walter Kennedy from the NBA. Walter, of course, when we first knew Walter, was the publicity head of Notre Dame, athletic publicity head at Notre Dame. And since that time has gone on to rather an interesting life. Red Manning from Pittsburgh. Red's at Duquesne, isn't he?
Yeah. That's a Duquesne.
And Gene and Bill Waters send one from
the athletic board.
Yes, certainly the athletic board. A little bit of smudge there. But those are just some of the well-wishers, and of course a little later on we're going to get around to other things as well. But anyway, as I said, my job here is to introduce speakers. The speeches are going to be necessarily reduced in number. You're not going to have 7,000 people parading up here making speeches tonight. And those who are going to make speeches and presentations have agreed that they will move things along pretty well. But here we have a fella tonight whom I've known since I came to this town. And I have to tell this story. I'm going to tell it. That's all there is to it. Maybe I'm stepping on somebody else's story before they do. But I remember so well, since I sit up here with George Mikan. George Mikan, incidentally, and Dick Klein and I all have something in common. We all had to sue to get away from the American Gears before it was over. That's pro basketball, Ray. You wouldn't know a thing about that. But here's a fella who 9 out of 10 pep talks that he makes can start out with and end with, there they are, the school that turns you guys down, let's go get them. And this in itself speaks so eloquently to the job that's been done by Ray and by DePaul. And I remember so well, I happened to be working the PA at the stadium back in, I think it was 1942. You can correct me on the chronology here, George and Ray. I was working the PA at the stadium for one of Art Morse's basketball games when a fellow by the name of George Mikan walked out on the floor with a makeshift glasses protector, which I understand later was corrected as time went by and finally wound with a good, this is no bargain this night, I think it was held on with adhesive tape. And this fellow literally tripped over his own 2 feet as he walked out. They'd worked hard on this boy. They had worked hard on him, but he still was a long way from the finished product. But out he went, and his legs must have been a little rubbery. He may want to talk about that later on. But I remember a story when Ray Meyer, who incidentally was the captain at Notre Dame in his junior year as well as his senior year, which of course is an accomplishment, working under George Keegan down there, God rest his soul. And Moose, I'll never forget the night you called and told me about Mr. Keegan. But Mikan could not make it at Notre Dame. The fact that he was big did not mean that he was a basketball prospect in not only George Keegan's opinion, and this is one of the few mistakes George Keegan ever made, but other coaches as well. The next thing you know, Meyer winds up at DePaul, and this fella has enlisted enrolled at DePaul, and the rest, of course, is history. We now have at the table the man who was voted the outstanding college basketball player of the last 50 years. Well, there'll be more about that later. Other people want to talk about that. And maybe one of the fellows who'd like to talk about Ray Meyer a little bit is a fellow who, like so many of the people in that audience, has been feted, has been the principal speaker, has been given a testimonial here and there, and is good for many, many more. But he's here for the same reason the rest of us are, because we all love this guy and this beautiful gal alongside him. The director of athletics at Notre Dame, whose conscience still doesn't bother him in spite of the fact that he wrecked 3 out of the first 5 Bradley regulars in 20 minutes, the first time I ever saw him at Peoria. And don't tell him basketball's not a bodily contact sport. The director of athletics at Notre Dame, Moose Krause. Moose.
Thank you very much, Jack, for that nice introduction. Reverend Fathers, ladies and gentlemen, I think the last time I was in Chicago, I was at the Hilton Hotel speaking before a Notre Dame group, and another comedian introduced me on that occasion. It happened to be Bob Hope, and he was trying to think of something nice to say about me, talked about people at the head table. He finally turned over to where I was sitting, and he said, I also remember the days when Moose Krause played football at Notre Dame. He said, those were the days when Conrad Hilton used to stay at the Y. I'm so very happy to be here to pay tribute to a great friend of mine, Ray Meyer. I know years ago I had something to do about the advancement he made in higher education. Bill Shea brought him to Notre Dame one time to meet our head coach, George Keegan. And if Bill remembers this, he and I took Ray over to meet George Keegan. And from there on, he went to Notre Dame, of course, became a great success, received a very fine education, and then came here to DePaul. And of course, his record is very, very outstanding, as everyone knows. I'm not going to bore this audience, Father O'Malley, with any discussion on the value of a higher education or the need of a higher education. A few weeks ago, I was in Columbus, Ohio, and I spoke before the principals of the great state of Ohio, and my subject was the need of a higher education, the value of a higher education. I concluded my oration in a very spirited fashion, and all principals stood up and gave me a standing ovation. I was so pleased with my efforts until I went to the airport the next morning and picked up the newspaper, and the headline read, Moose Krause's talk shows need for education. Ray, all I can say on an occasion like this, the only testimonial I had was when the alumni gave me traveling bags and I was headed from Buffalo after losing a basketball game. And in fact, when I was ill, I noticed all these wonderful letters, wires that Ray got tonight. It pleased me so much because he's so well respected by so many people in the world of sports. I remember 3 years ago when Notre Dame was losing football games, I got suddenly sick like the rest of the alumni, and I was in the hospital and received a wire from Father Joyce, the chairman of the athletic board of Notre Dame, saying, we wish you a speedy recovery, voted 4-3. Ray is not in that kind of situation. In fact, Ray, if you don't mind, my feeling tonight reminds me so much about this truck driver who stopped in South Bend one time. You people have seen these truck drivers with these big trailers. One guy drives the truck, the other guy sleeps, and they exchange positions. One day the truck driver stopped in South Bend and he was having a cup of coffee, and the guy next to him says, are you the truck driver of that trailer? He said, yes, I am. I'm the finest truck driver in the world. I've driven all the roads in our United States. He said, if you're so good, what would you do if you were traveling 70 miles an hour in that big trailer of yours and you got to the crest of a hill and right in front of you, 10 yards in front of you, is a stalled Volkswagen. And in front of the stalled Volkswagen is a trailer about the size that you're in. What would you do? He said, I would get Harry up. And the guy says, why would you get Harry up? Because Harry's never seen an accident like this. So, Ray, I've never seen such a fine group and so many people honoring a great guy, and I want to pay my tribute to you as well, Ray, and I hope sincerely that we'll all be here 25 years hence to pay another special tribute to a great guy. Congratulations, Ray.
Next fellow, of course, I suppose this joke has been used many, many times in introducing him. He's the biggest lawyer in Minnesota. And he has a new title now, Commissioner of the American Basketball Association. And anybody in this room who has never heard of George Mikan has certainly come to the wrong function. George Mikan of DePaul.
We're going to have to teach him the DePaul song. Mr. Brickhouse, Reverend Fathers, honored guests, and last but not least, Mr. and Mrs. Ray Meyer. You know, this is indeed a great honor for me to be a part of this program, to pay homage to a great guy and his lovely wife. You know, it started all here 25 years ago as far as I'm concerned. It's pretty hard to say 25 years. It just seems like yesterday to me. I don't feel any older. I might look a lot older and things of that nature, but I don't feel older. As I travel about the country, as a man in my profession, I'm always asked, what did Ray Meyer do for me? Well, I don't think there's enough words in the dictionary to tell you what he had done for me. The hours he spent, the hours he contributed of himself, the way he used the big black whip out there to make me go. He made a basketball player out of me at just as one of the attributes. But the thing I treasure more is to know the man Ray Meyer. I think he's the nicest guy that's ever come down the pike. We've known him for 25 years. And I defy anyone in this room to tell me that he has changed. Ray is still Ray. And this we'll always treasure. I've been given a lot of awards, a lot of accolades, things that are material. And believe me, each time I take one of these things, I think of the guy who made it possible. I also think of my school, DePaul University. I'm very proud to say that I'm a DePaul man. Now that I'm commissioner of a basketball league, I've been given quite a challenge. I hope I'm the man that can bring it off. We got a lot of hard work ahead of us, but we got some pretty good training. We fought from the word go. They talk about slush funds today. When we went to school, money was even a dirty word. But we had something in those days. We had a group of fellas that really played as a unit. We had a guy leading us, and actually we were just sort of kidding back and forth about the time we played in Toledo, about the times we played in Duquesne, and we go on and on. About the time, you believe it or not, Ray Meyer put his coat on backwards one day walking down the street, and you should see the amazed people that met us walking down the street. I also remember the days that when we were so tight, he'd taken us to the big town of New York to play in the NIT tournaments, the NCAA tournaments, and all these different tournaments. Where have you ever heard of a coach call the boys in the room, say, I want you fellas to relax tonight? And you know what he had for us as a surprise? A bathtub full of beer. You remember those days, Ray? Huh? I'll never forget them. He said, all right, fellas, knock yourself out. You've been training all year. It's time to blow off a little steam. These are very pleasant memories. You know, Ray, I tell my sons about you. I try to sell them on DePaul University. But I let them choose. I'm a little selfish too, I guess. I wanted to see my boys play. I wanted to be a little close to me, and maybe we're a little prejudicial. Ray, if you only had a spot to keep these fellas, you would probably have my sons too. It's a little dig. I know Father Wenger's going to kick me in the ankle when I come back. He said, what are you talking about that? I mean, when we were talking about housing, talking about eating around the campus, things like that. You remember Eddie Coker when he used to feed us? All we had to do was peel 2 sacks of potatoes. And then I was elevated. Finally, I was the head of all the boys working there. I was given the duty to be the cashier and take a little bit of the money. I mean, for him, not for me. You know, it's pretty nice to be able to sit at a head table like this, paying respect to wonderful people, to see all these wonderful people over Mr. Klein, who's a part of the NBA. They've been ribbing me a little bit that there's the opposition. I don't think it's opposition. I think we're all in the same business. I hope that our league could one day match the league that he's playing in. He sort of was an inspiration for myself in this thing. If Chicago could make it in the professional league, I think there's room for other teams. So this is our battle cry. I'm not going to take too much time, Ray, but you know, I was reminded of a story tonight about a little Jewish fella. He was walking down the street and a panhandler came up to him. And the fella says, do you have a quarter that I could have? He said, I'm awfully hungry. And the Jewish fellow looked at him, he reached in his pocket, he says, have a cigar. And the fellow says, please, he said, I don't want a cigar. May I have a quarter to get something to eat? Well, the fellow said there, the little Jewish fellow says, say I'm going in this tavern here, and he says, I'm going to have a drink. Would you join me for a drink? The fellow looked at him, he says, no, he says, I don't want a drink. May I have a quarter to get something to eat? I'm hungry. So the little Jewish fellow said to him, hey, listen, I'll tell you what, I'll make you a deal. I'll give you $10 if you'll stand on this corner for 10 minutes. And the fellow said, why? Well, he said, I want to go home and bring my wife down here and show you to her, just to see that she knows what happens to a guy that doesn't drink or smoke. Well, Ray, on behalf of myself, my lovely wife, our children, my brothers, and all the guys that are in this room, the guys that played for you, I'd like to just speak their sentiments of this. May the good Lord always watch upon you and yours. May everything you wish and have hope to accomplish be so. And may you always be Ray Meyer. Thank you very much.